Welcome to Asiatique. I'm your host, Dr. Raymond. Well, the Winter Olympics 2022 is just around the corner, and if you are as curious as I do, you probably realize if you go on to, let's say, Google and do a little bit of a search, you see terms like diplomatic boycott. And if you try to search the term boycott, you come up with options like boycott Winter Olympics, boycott Beijing Olympics, boycott Beijing Olympics petition, EU boycott, US boycott, Canadian boycott, will countries boycott 2022 Olympics, should countries be boycotting them, or full boycott, push for Beijing 2022. Well, this week we're going to talk about boycotting Beijing Olympics, the Winter Olympics 2022. Well, we said we're going to talk about the boycott, right? Now, the interesting thing here is that they're talking about, if you read from these reports these days, you realize way back in March, for instance, 2021 March, they're talking about boycotting the Olympics, and they're talking about a full boycott. But what really interests me is that this kind of a full boycott is slowly changing into diplomatic boycott. And just a little over a week ago, US President Joe Biden was saying that he is going to diplomatically boycott the Beijing Olympics 2022. This interests me because what they're saying is that basically you're not sending high-level diplomats to the opening ceremony or closing ceremony, and yet you're going to send all your athletes there. So you're not going to be there for the opening, not going to be there for the closing, but you still participate. So that's what they call diplomatic boycott. But what interests me here is that look at the reasons of why they're boycotting it, or why they're saying that they have to diplomatically boycott it. Well, one thing that they talk about was that China has human rights issue in Xinjiang, in the Xinjiang province, and that China is committing genocide against the Uyghurs in the Xinjiang province. Now, what I'm interested here is that it's not just about the boycott, but if you look at those US reports talking about the situation in Xinjiang, you would realize that they were talking about things like, oh, the Uyghurs are now suffering from systematic torture and cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment. Now, they actually gave out a number of examples as well, and what they said was, okay, the region's government homestays, as well as the state-run orphanages and forced labor schemes are designed to indoctrinate and wash clean brains. Oh, wait a minute. Did you not hear what I said? Okay, let me just repeat that part again. Number one, they said the region's government homestays. Well, what are homestays? Not homestays supposed to be homes that would welcome tourists. So how would you be able to sort of welcome a tourist and, okay, you're a tourist, right? Are you going to stay in my house for like how long? 2 weeks? Okay. And then the tourist is going to brainwash you. Is that what they're talking about? So what kind of a tourist is that? Oh, wait a minute. These tourists are foreigners. Aren't they talking about foreigners brainwashing the people in Xinjiang? Now, that doesn't make sense. Number two, if you look at what they said state-run orphanages. Now, what are orphanages? Now, if you look at orphanages, it means you have a place for orphans. So, wait a minute. If you say this is a regime that cruel, then you should have said something like, the regime actually killed the fathers and the mothers, and now they're setting up that orphanage, and they put in all those people, all those kids in the orphanage, and that state-run orphanage is where they brainwash the people, brainwash the kids, brainwash the second generation. They didn't talk about anything like killing their fathers and mothers. They're only talking about orphanages. Now that is the problem, because we can find orphans everywhere on this planet. Now, we don't know where these orphans come from. There could be a number of reasons where these orphans could pop up. But the problem is when the government is now doing state-run orphanages, that means the government is taking care of the orphans. And why the heck would they say this is a place where they're going to brainwash people? Come on. Each and every government, now let's not talk about this from the Asian perspective. Let's just talk about this from the human perspective. You are any country, any given country. You start that state-run, government-run orphanage. What are you going to do? You're going to teach them what that government thinks is right. are you going to teach them what you think is not right? So if you look at that from that kind of a perspective, every orphanage is basically a brainwash center. And if you look at this report, they said nothing about where these orphans came from. So the thing is, they're not condemning the Chinese government for creating these orphans. Now, wait a minute. If you really think this regime is that evil, well, they could have said something like, well, they created something or they've done something that have led to all these orphans popping up. So, and now that they have created those orphans and even the orphanage or even the orphanages are evil. Now, they should have said it that way instead of saying a state-run government orphanage is a brainwash center. That doesn't make sense. So if you think of it that way, then why the heck would you not say the Chinese prison is a brainwash center? Now, that is even more logical in a way, right? Now, and then, number 3, they're talking about forced labor schemes. Well, let's do it this way. Look at what happens around the world. We're talking about every single government is trying to sort of lower the unemployment rate. So they're trying to get people every single government basically wants the people to have a job. Well, because that's the source of stability. You want people to have their jobs, have their families, because that is how you make them feel stable, isn't it? So when you give them a job, and mind you, now when is the last time you say, hey, I'm forced to work? It's because either you don't want to work or because you already have your work and you have too much work and that's why you don't want to work. Now, wait a minute. They're not working a lot, I can tell you. Now, who is not working a lot? Let me tell you this. If you check what's happening in Qatar, you will see how government employees work a small number of hours per day. Check this video.
عملت إحصائيات لمتوسط وقت العمل لموظفي الحكومة في إحدى الدول العربية فكان المتوسط 27 دقيقة في اليوم.
27 minutes. Now, when was the last time you worked 27 minutes per day? Now, if you are going to be working for 27 minutes a day, and now I'm saying, hey, you shouldn't be working for 27 minutes a day. You should work 2.5 hours per day. No, this is forced labor. So when you were talking about that forced labor schemes, wait a minute. One thing very important is how long these people are working each day, every day. Are you saying that anything like a 9-to-5 job is forced labor? Now, try to imagine this. If they don't do that job, they could probably end up having no job. And any governments wouldn't want to see that because, like I said, this is one very important source of stability. The more unemployed people you have in a country, the more likely it's going to get unstable. And of course, you don't want to be unstable. And why would you want that place to be stable? Come on, there is a whole lot of reason for that. Look at Xinjiang. If you look at the map of China, Xinjiang is basically a quarter. So it takes up like 1/4 of the entire China. It's rich in natural resources, water, land, sunlight, utilizable pasture, and also 134 varieties of natural reserves. Now, if you look at this place in detail, you would see they have natural gas, non-ferrous metals like copper and gold, as well as prospective reserves of oil. We're talking about oil reserves in excess of 30 billion tons. And for natural gas, that exceeds 10,000 billion cubic meters as well. So this is basically a place with all the natural resources of China. Now, if you look at the ranking of natural resources of countries on this planet, you'll see China having, well, most, in terms of variety, most of these natural resources. And 1/4 of it actually goes into this particular province. Now, no wonder you want stability in this particular province. Try to imagine this. Do you want to riot in a place where you have all the natural resources? You don't. It's just like that kitchen or maybe your garage in the house where you keep your food, you keep your stock, you keep your car. And do you want to fight in the kitchen? Do you want to fight in your garage? You probably don't want it. You probably don't want it to happen. So if you look at that, Xinjiang province is basically the storeroom of China. The natural resources storeroom of China. In that sense, everything becomes clear. Now, if you are talking about boycotting China as a result of the natural resources there, then you're basically telling people, I mean for Asians, when we see that, for Chinese as we see that, it would be something like, hey, we're boycotting you because you have 2 garages, you have 3 garages, you have 2 kitchens, and your kitchen is full of food. So we want to boycott you as a result of that. It's not about the human rights thing. Anyway, I just don't like that you have everybody having their jobs there. Well, if you look at that, and if you try to look at what Xinjiang means to China, you would see that the natural resources in Xinjiang per person, which is per capita, is twice as much as that for the rest of the region of China, which means they have much more resources than any other regions in China. And that explains why the jealousy, of course. You might say, no, there are Uyghurs complaining about this in America. Wait a minute, we do have Americans complaining about America as well in Hong Kong. We do have Brits complaining about the UK in China. So come on, there's always somebody complaining. And are you going to look at the real Xinjiang and ask them, are you all complaining? If they're all complaining, there should be riots. There should be widespread riots, at least. But what do you see? You see a very peaceful province. And of course, you might say, no, wait a minute. They are doing that militarily. They are suppressing these people militarily. Well, put it this way. If you think this is true, if you think there really is something like genocide in Xinjiang, look at the immigration patterns, look at the diaspora, look at how people are going to run away from that province. Or do you really think that it's going to be just 2 people or maybe 20 people complaining about Xinjiang in America? No, we are talking about millions of people leaving that place. But can you find those millions of people leaving that place? They're still there. They're still working in those what you call camps, what you call concentration camps. Well, that depends on how you call it, right? Look, it's just a matter of terms sometimes. When Japan was talking about borrowing money from the World Bank just to build the railway, that was supposed to be a development aid from the World Bank. But when Chinese did the same thing and provided the money for let's say, African friends, what the American media was saying, this is a debt trap. Now try to imagine this. When the World Bank is doing this, it's called a development aid, whereas when China's doing that, it's called a debt trap. So look at that. It's just a matter of the term, and it's just a matter of how you see it. If you are going to label that with this kind of a stereotypical idea that China is doing something evil, then of course you're going to label that as debt trap. But look, if it really is a debt trap, if those are really concentration camps, look at the numbers, look at the truth, look at the facts around. You should see people running away from that place. Come on, you're shooting, right? Well, the moment you hear shots fired, the moment you hear tanks rolling in, are you not going to run? Are you still going to go back to your home and stay there and take care of that terrorist in your homestay? Now, it doesn't make sense at all. The homestay wouldn't be there. And by the way, would foreigners be there as well, living at those homestays? No, of course. Even governments, foreign governments would issue warnings saying that, hey, don't go there, there's a riot there. There are people rioting and they are trying to overturn the government. Something like that. Have you ever heard of that? No. And when you don't heard of that, when you can't find that, and you think they're running a brainwashing homestay, a brainwashing government-run orphanage, a brainwashing government-run forced labor schemes, come on, try to merge these things together. The logic just doesn't compute. So to conclude, what we really need to know is that it's not just about understanding the others, understanding a neighbor country or a nation somewhere around the world. Come on, we're on the same planet. We're living in the same world. What we really have to understand living in this planet is that we have to put down those petty differences. We're talking about the Olympics. And even if you're not talking about the Olympics, look at the world around you. Remember, your car is German, your vodka is Russian, your pizza is Italian, your kebab is Turkish, your coffee is Brazilian, your tea is Tamil, your shirt is Indian, your oil is Saudi Arabian, and mind you, your letters are Latin, and even your numbers are Arabic. And when you are telling the world that this is what you have to do because you have the democracy thing, even democracy is Greek. So the only thing that I can tell, and the only thing that I can remember all the time, is that movies are American. So Look, if you are gonna be like that, remember, this is the world that you're living in. You're not living in a world of movies, you're living in a real world. So, let's get real. And until then, ciao. Oh, you know, the time is now you won't believe this, the time is now 1:25. Don't get me wrong, this is not in the afternoon. We are in midnight. This is midnight, 1:20, and we are now doing the recording. We've been doing the pre-recording discussion for like, 6 hours? Okay, so now we're gonna start. Okay, so ready, right? Ready, everybody? Okay.
Before you leave, please be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share this with your friends. See you in the next episode.